When Princess Anne and Catherine appeared before the cameras that day, no one expected what followed. The setting was quiet, almost ordinary, a small charity event meant to highlight long-standing work, not royal drama. There were no grand backdrops, no heavy press presence, and no formal announcement from the palace beforehand. It was meant to pass without headlines. But something changed the moment Prince Louis's name was mentioned. The atmosphere shifted in a way that was impossible to ignore. According to those present, the room seemed to tighten, as if everyone suddenly felt they were standing too close to something deeply personal. Princess Anne, known for her strength and straightforward nature, paused mid-sentence. Catherine, usually composed and polished, reached for her glass of water, but stopped halfway. Silence filled the space. It was not planned, not rehearsed, and not controlled. Then, slowly, both women broke. Anne lowered her head, her shoulders tense. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, and when she spoke, her voice shook. "There's so much people don't know," she said softly. Within seconds, aides moved to stop the cameras. The feed ended abruptly. But those few seconds had already been seen. And in the royal world, moments like that are never just moments. They are signals. What followed was not explanation, but silence. The palace released only a short statement calling the moment deeply personal. No clarification was given. No details were offered. That silence, more than the footage itself, triggered questions. Online, people began asking why Prince Louis had not been seen publicly for months. There were no recent family photos, no school updates, no brief appearances during public moments where he once stood smiling beside his siblings. At first, many assumed it was simply privacy. But privacy usually comes with reassurance. This time, there was none. Sources close to royal watchers began pointing out patterns. Prince Louis's absence had been gradual but steady. Each event passed without him, until people realized he had quietly disappeared from public view. According to unconfirmed reports, even some palace staff began asking questions internally. Those questions were met with polite dismissal. Everything was said to be fine. Nothing more was shared. Behind palace walls, however, the mood was reportedly far from calm. Catherine, always known as a devoted mother, had noticeably reduced her public engagements. Some were postponed. Others were cancelled. At first, this was explained as focusing on family life. But insiders claim her withdrawal was not rest, but strain. She was described as exhausted, emotionally worn down, and deeply worried. According to sources close to her circle, Catherine had been spending more time away from advisors and more time with her children. She reportedly pushed back against palace routines, insisting on changes that would reduce pressure on her youngest son. These requests were not always welcomed. The monarchy operates on schedules, appearances, and expectations. Adjustments are possible, but only to a point, and when concerns challenge the image of stability, resistance often follows. It was during this time that Princess Anne became more involved. Anne is not known for emotional displays or public softness. She is practical, disciplined, and deeply loyal to duty. But she is also fiercely protective of her family. According to people familiar with palace dynamics, Anne began making private visits, not announced, not scheduled through public channels. She reportedly spent long hours speaking with Catherine, often away from staff and advisors. The conversations were said to be quiet, serious, and filled with concern. Anne, who has seen decades of royal life, recognized patterns she had seen before. The pressure to maintain appearances. The tendency to minimize discomfort. The belief that silence keeps control. And this time, the cost of that silence appeared to be a child. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Prince Louis had been struggling emotionally. No official diagnosis was ever shared, and none will be claimed here, but sources say there were signs that something was not right. He was said to be quieter than before, more withdrawn, and easily overwhelmed. Teachers reportedly raised gentle concerns, noting changes in behavior that did not match his age. These concerns were recorded, then set aside. Specialists were consulted privately. Their findings, if any, were sealed under confidentiality. Even within the palace, information was tightly controlled. Catherine, according to those close to her, felt trapped between instinct and institution. She wanted help, she wanted time, but she also felt pressure to keep everything normal, calm, and presentable. At some point, silence became too heavy to carry. Princess Anne, who had remained loyal to the crown through decades of change, reportedly reached a breaking point. According to insiders, she made a direct appeal to King Charles. It was not scheduled, it was not filtered through advisors, it was personal. Anne reportedly warned that Prince Louis was being lost in the system meant to protect him. She spoke of warning signs, of emotional strain, and of the dangers of waiting too long. She reminded her brother of the past, of moments when silence had caused irreversible damage. Whether Charles fully agreed remains unclear. What is known is that no immediate public action followed, and once again the palace chose quiet. Meanwhile, the public sensed something was wrong. Social media began to fill the gaps that official silence left behind. Hashtags began trending. Questions turned into concern, and concern turned into frustration. People were not demanding scandal, they were demanding reassurance. They wanted to know that a child was safe, supported, and seen. But instead of clarity, they received denial. Footage that briefly surfaced online was dismissed as misleading. Statements emphasized privacy. The more the palace tried to close the door, the louder the knocking became. For Catherine, the pressure was becoming unbearable. According to reports, she confided in someone she trusted, a former aide who had known her before royal life hardened into routine. During a quiet walk, away from cameras and expectations, Catherine is said to have admitted something deeply painful. "I don't know how to reach him anymore." The words were not dramatic, they were exhausted. She spoke of trying everything, changing routines, seeking help quietly, and still feeling as though nothing was working. She feared that the palace's need for control was standing in the way of real care. She feared being told to wait when waiting felt dangerous, and she feared that her voice, as a mother, was being softened into background noise. That confession, according to those familiar with the situation, changed everything. It marked the moment when private worry turned into quiet resistance. Anne and Catherine, from very different backgrounds and roles, found common ground in one truth. A child mattered more than image. Whatever was coming next would not stay hidden forever. And when the cameras finally returned, when Anne and Catherine sat side by side and spoke openly, it was not strategy. It was survival. As concern continued to grow, the palace found itself under pressure from all sides. Internally, advisors urged calm, patience, and control. Externally, the public demanded answers. Between those two forces stood Catherine, carrying a weight that no title could protect her from. According to people familiar with her situation, she felt caught in a system that treated emotional pain as a public relations issue rather than a human one. She was asked to trust processes, wait for reviews, and accept reassurances that did not match what she saw at home. Each day, the gap between what was said publicly and what was felt privately grew wider, and that gap became impossible to ignore. Princess Anne, watching this unfold, reportedly became more vocal behind closed doors. Anne had lived through royal crises before. She had seen what happens when discomfort is ignored for the sake of appearances. According to unconfirmed accounts, she warned senior figures that silence was no longer protection, it was damage. She is said to have argued that if the monarchy truly wanted to present strength, it needed honesty, not distance. But the institution moves slowly, and by design. Decisions are layered, filtered, and carefully measured. For Anne, that pace felt dangerous. Time, she believed, was something Prince Louis did not have the luxury to lose. Meanwhile, rumors continued to circulate. Some suggested health issues, others spoke of emotional strain. Most of these claims were never confirmed, and many were exaggerated. But the reason they spread so quickly was simple. There was a vacuum of truth. When official voices stay silent, unofficial ones grow louder. People began re-watching old footage of Prince Louis, noticing how lively and expressive he once appeared. Comparisons were drawn. Questions multiplied. And still, the palace offered nothing beyond controlled statements about privacy and protection. According to sources close to the family, tensions reached a peak during a private family gathering. What was meant to be a quiet moment reportedly became strained. Voices were raised, emotions surfaced. Someone, against strict rules, recorded a short clip on a phone. The footage was shaky, unclear, and brief. But it captured something undeniable. Prince Louis appeared overwhelmed, distant, and uncomfortable. Adult voices could be heard in the background, tense and strained. The clip ended abruptly. Within hours of appearing online, it was removed. But removal did not erase it. Copies spread. The palace dismissed it as misleading and taken out of context. Independent reviewers later claimed it showed no signs of editing. Whether fully accurate or not, the clip changed public perception. This was no longer gossip. It was a moment people could see and feel. The reaction was immediate. Support poured in from parents, educators, and mental health advocates. Many did not accuse. They empathized. They recognized the signs of a child struggling under pressure. The question shifted from blame to responsibility. Who was listening? Who was acting? And why did it take a leak for concern to be acknowledged? Inside the palace, departments clashed. Security searched for the source of the recording. Communications teams scrambled to regain control of the narrative. But control was slipping. The story had moved beyond management. Amid this growing storm, two figures disappeared from public view almost entirely: Catherine and Princess Anne. Their absence spoke louder than any statement. Scheduled appearances were cancelled. Charity events went ahead without them. For days, then weeks, neither woman addressed the situation publicly. Some interpreted this as retreat. Others saw it as preparation. Behind the scenes, according to insiders, conversations were happening that would change the tone of everything that followed. Then came an unexpected voice: Prince Harry. Long positioned as distant from royal life, Harry made a quiet but powerful statement through a brief message shared online. He did not name anyone directly. He did not accuse. He simply wrote about what it feels like to grow up unseen, unheard, and shaped by expectations that ignore emotional reality. The message resonated instantly. People connected his words to the situation unfolding around Prince Louis. Harry's history gave weight to his concern. This was not rebellion. It was recognition, and it struck a nerve. The palace could no longer pretend the situation was contained. The public conversation had shifted from curiosity to accountability. Commentators began asking whether the monarchy had learned anything from its past, whether systems built to protect tradition were capable of protecting individuals, especially children. Pressure mounted for a response that went beyond statements and silence. That response finally came in the form of an unexpected broadcast. No ceremony, no formal setting, no royal symbols behind them. Princess Anne and Catherine sat side by side on a simple couch. The tone was quiet, serious, real. Anne spoke first. She did not read from prepared notes. She spoke plainly. She said this was not about reputation or roles. It was about family. About responsibility. About a child who needed understanding more than expectation. She acknowledged that mistakes had been made, that warnings were not always heard, that silence had caused harm. Then Catherine spoke. Her voice was steady at first, then softened. She spoke not as a royal figure, but as a mother. She explained that Prince Louis had been facing challenges that required time, patience, and support. She said professional advice had been given, but not always followed quickly. She admitted feeling overwhelmed and unheard. "I was told not to worry," she said, "but I knew something wasn't right." Her honesty was disarming. She did not ask for sympathy. She asked for awareness. She urged parents watching not to wait, not to minimize, not to let systems override instinct. The reaction was immediate and emotional. Messages of support flooded in from around the world. Mental health professionals praised the openness. Families shared their own stories. The tone shifted from outrage to empathy. But one voice was notably absent. King Charles did not appear. He did not issue a statement. He did not stand beside them. His silence raised new questions. Some saw it as restraint. Others saw it as distance. Either way, it deepened the divide. Behind palace walls, that divide became impossible to ignore. According to insiders, a decision was made quickly, without broad agreement. Prince Louis would no longer take part in future royal engagements. Officially, this was framed as protection. Privately, some viewed it as removal. Catherine reportedly received the news quietly. She did not argue. She did not protest. She simply withdrew. For her, the decision felt less like care and more like exclusion. William, caught between duty and family, did not publicly challenge it. That silence strained their relationship deeply. Princess Anne, however, did not stay quiet. Sources say she confronted Charles directly, questioning whether the institution had lost sight of its purpose. If it could not protect its most vulnerable, she asked, what was it protecting at all? Her words reportedly carried weight, but they did not reverse the decision. What they did was expose a fracture that could no longer be hidden. And so the monarchy stood at a crossroads, not defined by scandal, but by choice, between image and care, between tradition and truth, between silence and responsibility. Prince Louis's future remained private, as it should be, but the conversation he sparked was public, and it would not fade easily. Because this time, the story was not about power. It was about a child. And once people see that, they do not look away. After the decision was made to remove Prince Louis from future royal duties, the palace attempted to move forward as if the issue had been resolved. Official schedules continued. Public events resumed. Carefully planned appearances returned to headlines. On the surface, the system appeared stable again. But underneath that calm exterior, something had shifted permanently. The public no longer viewed the silence as strength. It felt like avoidance. And for many, the image of Catherine sitting quietly beside Princess Anne, speaking openly about her fears, had already changed how they saw the monarchy forever. Catherine's absence from public life became more noticeable. When she did appear, she looked different. Still composed, still graceful, but quieter, less performative. According to people close to her, she had drawn a line. Her focus was no longer on fulfilling expectations, but on protecting her children. She continued her work behind the scenes, choosing causes that centered on early childhood support, emotional health, and family well-being. These choices were not accidental. They reflected lived experience, and many people noticed. Catherine was no longer just representing modern royalty. She was representing motherhood under pressure. Princess Anne, too, began to shift. While she maintained her duties, there was a subtle change in tone. She spoke more openly about responsibility, about listening, about learning from past mistakes. Her words were careful, but their meaning was clear. Anne had spent her life serving the institution, but now she was asking it to look inward. According to royal watchers, this was one of the rare moments where Anne's loyalty to family outweighed her loyalty to tradition. And that mattered. Inside the palace, relationships remained strained. William found himself caught in the middle, torn between the role he was born into and the family he was trying to protect. Those close to him say he struggled deeply with the decision surrounding his youngest son. Silence for William had always felt safer than conflict. But this time, silence came at a cost. It created distance between him and Catherine, a distance that could not be explained away by duty alone. Trust, once shaken, does not return easily. King Charles, meanwhile, remained largely unseen. His lack of public response continued to draw criticism. Some defended his restraint, arguing that leadership sometimes means stepping back. Others felt his absence confirmed what many feared, that the monarchy still struggled to respond emotionally when emotional response was most needed. Charles had inherited a crown shaped by tradition and trauma. Whether he was equipped to reshape it remained an open question. Outside palace walls, the conversation grew broader. Prince Louis was no longer just a royal child. He had become a symbol. Parents spoke about the pressure children face in structured systems. Educators discussed the importance of early emotional support. Mental health professionals emphasized listening over labeling. The story expanded beyond royalty. It became about families everywhere who felt unheard by institutions meant to serve them. Importantly, many voices called for restraint. They reminded others that Prince Louis deserved privacy, space, and time. That curiosity should not become intrusion. That compassion should not become speculation. These voices helped redirect the conversation toward care rather than consumption. And that shift may have been the most meaningful outcome of all. Prince Harry's comments continued to echo quietly in the background. He did not speak again publicly, but he did not need to. His words had already landed. They reminded people that this was not a new problem, that emotional neglect had consequences that lasted decades, that children remember who listened and who did not. Harry's perspective did not reopen old wounds. It highlighted patterns, and patterns are hard to ignore once seen. As weeks passed, public attention slowly moved on, as it always does. New headlines replaced old ones, but for those paying close attention, the story was not over. It had simply moved out of view. Prince Louis's future would unfold privately, where it belonged. Whether he would ever return to public life was unknown, and perhaps that uncertainty was the point. For the first time, his needs appeared to take priority over his role. What remained was a lesson the monarchy could not easily erase, that strength is not silence, that protection is not removal, that listening matters more than control. Princess Anne and Catherine did not dismantle the institution. They did something far more challenging. They asked it to feel. And that may be why their moment of breaking down resonated so deeply. It was not weakness. It was honesty. In a world built on tradition, image, and restraint, they chose truth. They chose to speak when staying quiet would have been easier. And in doing so, they reminded people that even behind crowns and protocol, there are mothers, aunts, and children trying to be understood. As this chapter closes, one truth remains clear. Stories like this are uncomfortable because they force reflection, not just on the monarchy, but on how societies treat vulnerability, on how often we confuse control with care, and on how many children struggle quietly while adults debate appearances. Whatever the future holds for Prince Louis, one hopes it holds space, patience, and understanding. Because beyond the titles, beyond the headlines, beyond the institution, there is a child, and every child deserves to be seen. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, consider sharing your thoughts respectfully. And if it made you reflect on your own family, remember this: listening can change everything.